What if the Jewish people didn't reject Jesus because he filled the prophecies, but because he fulfilled them in a way nobody expected? In the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, there are clear signs. A Messiah from the line of David. He's a ruler who brings peace, someone who teaches, heals, and lifts up the poor, and someone who enters Jerusalem riding on a donkey. It was a symbol of peace and not war. But the people at that time were expecting a conqueror, a military leader, someone who would crush Rome and rebuild Israel by force. So when Jesus arrived riding a donkey, refusing to fight, teaching love instead of revolt, healing instead of leading and uprising, he didn't match the image they wanted. But the irony is, the prophecy said the Messiah would come humble, riding on a donkey. Jesus fulfilled it exactly, just not the way people expected. Even the Talmud acknowledges Jesus, not as a myth, not as a made-up figure, but as someone who performed miracles. They claimed it was sorcery, but calling it sorcery still admits something. It still admits that something supernatural was happening. Even its critics didn't deny his power. They only argued about the source. Some people say Jesus was just a Jewish rebel. Okay, let's pretend that's true for a moment. Then explain this. How did a poor man from a tiny village with no army, no political position, no wealth, how did he end up influencing the entire world, more than every empire and every general in history? He took over the world without drawing a single sword. Rome fell, every empire fell, but his influence only grew. This isn't normal. This isn't something a simple rebel accomplishes. Even if you're atheist, you can't deny the intelligence of Jesus' teachings. He taught emotional control, forgiveness, leadership, discipline, and psychological insight long before psychology existed. His influence built concepts like human rights, charity, equality, and the idea that every person has value. Even the people who don't believe in the Bible still live inside a world shaped by him. And outside the Bible, history confirms he was real. Writers like Tacitus, Josephus, and Pliny all mention Jesus. His followers, his execution under Rome, even atheist scholars don't deny he existed. So does heaven exist? Does God exist? No one can prove it with a lab test. But you can look at the impact. How does a man with no army defeat every empire? How does a man with no money become the center of human history? How does a man with no political power become more influential than every king? I mean, at some point, you have to at least ask yourself, what if he really was who he said he was? Because if he was, then heaven isn't a fairy tale. It's the ending of the story he started. You don't have to be religious to respect Jesus. You don't have to be Christian to learn from him. But if you study the history and the impact, you can't escape this conclusion. Jesus was not normal. Jesus wasn't ordinary. And Jesus wasn't just another man. The world is literally divided into two eras, before and after Jesus. And that alone should make anyone think.